For those of us who had the good fortune to work for the Appalachian Mountain Club in the Huts, the experience enriched us in many ways. It helped shape our personalities, and for many, it shaped and guided our careers. The hard physical work of packing, the daily chores of reaming the hut, cooking for huge crowds of hungry hikers, and answering their seemingly endless questions were tempered by the camaraderie we shared during raids, pack day excursions, and days off. At the annual Fall Fest reunion in November of 2018, a crew member from each of the decades, beginning with the 1940s, shared anecdotes and memories of their time in the huts. It was an evening of reflection punctuated with frequent laughter, where we looked back and took note of how much had changed and how much had stayed the same in AMC huts.
My name is Hanque Parker, and I was in the huts in 1942. And that's the way the hut looked in 1934, for those of you who didn't see it. But I want you to notice the trees, because when the hut was built, it was in a forest. And that's another picture of the hut in 34. Notice the shadows of the trees, because that hut was built in the forest. And in 1938, there was a hurricane that wiped out all the forests. So when I was there in 1942, it was clear, 360 degrees. There was no trees at all. And in fact, Ike Meredith, who was there the year before, shot the tops of all the new trees off with his rifle because he loved to shoot. The next picture shows the map of that we used in 1942. If you look carefully, there was the Gale River Trail went up past Hawthorne Falls, and that trail was deleted, I guess, during World War II. There was a trail down from North Twin that went down to the Gale River Trail, and there was a new trail that went up when the hut was built. That went up the river and then cut up to the hut. And if you'll notice, right behind the hut, there's a double trail. That's because in 1938, the trail that came up the ridge was piled high with logs, and so they built a new trail, if you can see all that. The next one compares that one with the current trail, and you'll see quite a few changes. Our pack house was at the Littleton Reservoir, which was down by Five Corners, and was about a mile or more longer than it was now. The Garfield tractor road to the top of Mountain Garfield to the fire lookout, which was built in by the CCCs. There was no Frost Trail, there was no Twin Brook Trail, and no Franconia Brook Trail. I will say that my hope was that I would live long enough to GPS the trail to Hawthorne Falls, which is about a quarter mile from the Garfield Ridge Trail. I hope some crew goes up there and GPS's that Hawthorne Falls. Galehead in Zealand opened in 1932, the same designs, 2 bunk rooms for 18 each, male and female, 2 crew beds. We had flush toilets. Our water tank in Galehead was on the poop deck and held 300 to 400 gallons. And at Galehead, one could flush the toilet and run out quickly and see what was coming out the pipe dumping into Pemigewasset. We installed the first shower in the huts in our pump line from the spring. We cooked on a 30-inch by 30-inch cast iron wood stove, and since the hurricane knocked down all those logs, we could go out within 50 feet of the wood pile, and with a two-man saw, cut up logs into about 18-inch lengths, and then split them and keep them dried until we used them. We heated all our water on the stove, and if we failed to heat hot water, then the guests would not hang around the kitchen and wash the dishes. Otherwise, if we heated hot water, they'd wash all the dishes. We had a barrel stove in the main room where we burned trash, and when it rained, we burned a lot of wood too to warm up the gophers and dry their clothes. For refrigeration, we had a trap door in the porch and kept things that we wanted to keep for a long period of time. Cheese and unsliced bacon would keep quite a while when wrapped in a vinegar-soaked cloth. We had a gorm line in the kitchen where we kept leftover food that nowadays you probably put in the refrigerator. I recall that we had a lot of recipes where we used sour milk because we had lots of sour milk. Our menu was a little different. Dinners were hot soup, hot bread, usually yeast rolls or muffins, a roast of meat of some sort, except on Sunday nights we had chicken a la king, which was standard at that time for Sundays. We had canned vegetables, potatoes and gravy, and we used cooked dessert and with the usual coffee, tea, and cocoa. Our breakfasts were canned fruit or reconstituted dried fruit, hot breads, muffins, coffee cakes, coffee tea, etc., etc. We also supplied each guest with a bag lunch, 2 sandwiches, a candy bar, and raisins. We seldom knew how many people were going to arrive for dinner. We had no radios, very few reservations, and so we just hoped somebody would arrive after we cooked a meal. We had a number of no guest nights when no people came at all, and we had a few days when we had 22 people for several days because of a lot of rainstorms. But usually we only had 6 to 10 people. We had a particularly difficult time with the guests who were coming in from the Lafayette area. There was a fire lookout at that time on Garfield, and he was very loquacious, at least for a lookout. And he kept hikers there for several hours. So guests kept coming in from Greenleaf, often at 8 p.m. or after dark. And of course, we had to feed them a full meal. In 1942 was BVS. BVS stands for Before Vibram Souls. And most hutmen used hobnail boots. Joe Dodge had an agreement with the cobbler in Gorham that he would take our heavy work boots and put on a 1/2-inch leather sole in which we could hammer in the hobnails. The AMC supplied us the hobnails as well as with a cobbler's lath so we could nail our boots every day if we needed to. Early in the season, a well-nailed boot would last several pack trips without needing attention. At the end of the season, as the soles aged and deteriorated, we would do some re-nailing for every trip. The beauty of hobnails is that they're unaffected by water, and they'd stick to a wet rock as well as to a dry rock. I used to go down the pack trail with just a pack board and the mail in 45 minutes for the 5-mile trip. And my best time to Zeeland was 1 hour and 13 minutes. Traveling like that was real tough on boot soles and hobnails. Galehead Hut had the nickname of Ghoul because Huck Sharp, who was hut master from 34 to 39, found a human skull, which we called the Dade in one of the abandoned Pemigewasset logging camps. His hobby was dump hunting and fishing on the more remote streams. In 1942, the logging railroad supplying the London mills was still operating in the Pemigewasset, and of course the Kankamogus Highway was nothing but a dream. The Dade skull was always kept in the shelf in the living room over the kitchen door. That was before there was much raiding, at least to Galehead. It was a little too far, and of course In those days, no crew member had a car. Remember, this was just when the war was starting. During 42, we built a box and marked it fresh eggs and asked guests to carry some eggs to Zealand since they were running low. Then the crew there at Zealand would open the box and display the skull during dinner. Then a couple of days later, they'd send it back to us. So it went back and forth. The dead head was around the huts as a raid item or until it showed up at Ann Dodge's wedding reception in August 1953. According to Ann Dodge, Hutman Brooks Van Evan felt that was really not proper to bring a dead head to the wedding reception, so he dumped it. And it's against the law to dump a human item in the dump. And so that was what it was like in 1942.